The geopolitical landscape of global trade fractured overnight on February 28, 2026, when the escalating tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran broke into open warfare. The immediate casualty was not just regional stability, but the most critical maritime choke point on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz. To the general public, this is a geopolitical crisis discussed on evening news panels. To an ambitious importer, it was the instant vaporization of predictability, transit times, and profit margins. We are currently witnessing the largest structural disruption to the world energy supply and maritime routing since the 1970s. Following the immediate closure of the strait, major container shipping conglomerates instantly suspended their transits. For the medium-sized enterprise relying on overseas manufacturing, this means your ocean freight is trapped, your vessels are being abruptly rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope, and your shipping costs are spiraling out of control due to war risk premiums and skyrocketing fuel surcharges. Even though a temporary 2-week ceasefire was established on April 8, the reality on the water right now, in mid-April, remains completely paralyzed. Ocean carriers do not operate on political promises, they operate on risk assessment, and right now, they are treating the Middle East transit corridors as total blackout zones. Before we break down the opposing strategies on how to survive this logistical blackout, I want to take a quick second to mention that 99% of the people watching this video are not subscribed to the channel. Navigating global supply chains during a wartime crisis is complicated enough without doing it in the dark, so please hit the subscribe button to support the channel and ensure you never miss an update. If you are listening to industry analysts, freight forwarders, and financial pundits right now, you are being bombarded with two completely opposing views on how to handle this crisis. The industry is fundamentally split on what the next 6 months look like, and if you choose the wrong camp, it could bankrupt your operation. The first group is the wait-and-see camp. Traditional maritime analysts and major bank economists largely occupy this side of the aisle. They argue that the April 8th ceasefire indicates a rapid, sustained de-escalation. Their primary thesis is that the global economy simply cannot sustain oil above $120 a barrel, and therefore international pressure will force the shipping lanes back open imminently. They are advising their mid-market clients to hold their cargo at the origin ports in Asia, absorb the temporary warehousing fees, and simply wait. They believe that maritime insurance premiums will drop in the coming weeks, and transit routes will normalize. According to this camp, paying exorbitant emergency rerouting fees or spot market air freight right now is an emotional overreaction. They argue that if you panic and shift your supply chain today, you will destroy your quarterly margins for a crisis that will resolve itself by next month. On the completely opposite side of the aisle, you have the structural shift camp. Geopolitical risk consultants and aggressive nearshoring advocates are heavily pushing this narrative. They argue that regardless of the current ceasefire, the Middle East is now permanently compromised as a reliable, high-volume transit corridor for the next decade. This camp's advice is total, immediate panic. They are telling companies to instantly abandon their overseas factory deposits, execute emergency nearshoring to Mexico or domestic manufacturers at double or triple the production cost, and shift all existing overseas inventory to air freight, regardless of the financial bleeding. They argue that if you do not get your inventory in the air today, you will have nothing to sell for the entirety of Q3 and Q4, and your business will die of inventory starvation. So the traditionalists think you should pause and wait for the ocean to calm, and the risk consultants think you should abandon the ocean entirely. But here is what we think. We think both of these perspectives are fundamentally flawed, and quite frankly, incredibly dangerous if you are operating a medium-sized enterprise. If you run a small, economically unviable mum-and-pop e-commerce brand, you can afford to pause your operations, or you can afford to pay air freight for 5 boxes of inventory. The math works when the volume is microscopic. On the other end of the spectrum, if you are a mega corporation like Walmart, Apple, or Amazon, you have the capital to charter your own private vessels, absorb massive air freight bills without blinking, or legally strong-arm carriers into prioritizing your boxes. But if you are a medium-sized enterprise, moving dozens or hundreds of containers a year, you are trapped in mid-market purgatory. You have massive inventory volume and highly complex cash flow requirements, but you do not have the geopolitical leverage of a Fortune 500 company. The wait-and-see approach will bleed your working capital dry. Your cash is already trapped in unmoving steel boxes sitting on a dock in Shenzhen, or drifting off the coast of Africa. If you wait, you cannot sell inventory you do not have, and you cannot buy replacement inventory because your cash is tied up on the water. The factory will not extend you credit, and your marketing dollars are burning out promoting products that are out of stock. Conversely, the structural shift panic approach will instantly bankrupt you. Moving 40-foot equivalent units entirely by air freight will consume your operating capital in a matter of days. Spot market air freight during a global crisis is not a shipping strategy. It is extortion. Our perspective is that medium-sized enterprises cannot operate on extremes. You cannot rely on hope, and you cannot rely on panic. You have to rely on logistical triage. The reality of this war is that it is weaponizing your invoices. Even if your goods never go near the combat zone, the global oil spike means your overseas factory is suddenly demanding an emergency inland fuel surcharge just to put your goods on a local truck to the origin port. The ocean carriers are aggressively invoking force majeure clauses, legally detouring their billion-dollar vessels to protect their crews, but instantly passing the financial liability of that detour down to you. To survive this, you have to execute a split-shipment strategy. You must ruthlessly analyze your purchase orders and identify the 20% of your SKUs that generate 80% of your revenue. You cannot afford to save the entire shipment via air freight, but you must keep your core, high-margin products in stock to keep the lights on. You must physically carve out that critical inventory on the factory floor before it is locked into a container. You route that core inventory through secure, pre-negotiated alternative networks, like strategic air freight allocations or land and rail bridge networks that bypass the maritime choke points entirely. Simultaneously, you consolidate your heavier, lower-margin bulk items and route them via the safest, most cost-effective ocean detour around the Cape of Good Hope. You accept the 60-day delay on the bulk cargo, but you survive because your cash-generating SKUs arrived on time. When global shipping lanes are compromised by warfare, the system is inherently designed to pass the liability down to the importer. You can spend your days auditing war risk tariffs, arguing with traditional forwarders who tell you to wait, or listening to consultants who tell you to panic. But the only actual path forward is calculated control. If you are a medium-sized enterprise realizing that you can no longer fight a multi-front logistical war alone, Infinite Panda acts as your ultimate control tower. We execute this exact predictive triage directly on the factory floor, securing your high-margin inventory and protecting your cash flow before the global blackout traps it. Stay tuned to the channel for more real-time information and visit infinitepanda.com to take control of your supply chain today.